Hello and welcome to Silver Age Silver Screen, a podcast where we watch, discuss, and review film adaptations of comics, anime, video games, and other stereotypically geeky works. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarms.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe.
And today we're going to be talking about a Batman movie. You know, like last week, DC had this big event and they showed this new Batman movie starring Robert Pattinson that was just dark and edgy and violent. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. So I went out, I googled Batman movie, and I watched it, and I gotta say, it was good, but there was a surprising lack of Edward Cullen in it.
Yeah.
We're discussing the 1989 Tim Burton directed Batman movie starring Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton, and Kim Basinger.
That's right. And one more thing about the Batman trailer that was funny. I watched it with my mother, where I watched it and then I showed my family it, and my mother said at the end of it, she goes, "So, like, Batman's gonna be evil in this movie?"
And I mean, yes, no, I mean, Batman's always a little evil. It depends on the incarnation, on how bad he is. He's definitely an anti-hero, and that's kind of fitting for this one, because this is, of the live-action Batman movies, probably the one where he's most morally gray, I would say.
Yes, absolutely.
Or
But
either
I would
this
argue,
or the other Michael Keaton one,
yes,
Batman
I would
Returns.
say the sequel to this one is
Yeah.
he's more morally gray.
Oh, and before we get into this, another big thing in like our zone of what we talk about, actor Chadwick Boseman, who most notably played Black Panther in the MCU, died a few days ago, which is just a terrible tragedy. Great actor. We'd recommend checking out donations for St. Jude's, because that was a big thing that he did a lot of work for. It's crying shame. Our hearts go out to his family.
Absolutely. It was such a terrible thing to hear. He was so talented, and he was just, from interviews and his work outside of acting, to me, from what I could tell, he just seemed like a genuinely good person. And to hear that he was going through chemotherapy and surgery and all of that whilst making 4 superhero films and telling no one about it, he will sorely be missed, and it's a terrible tragedy. And again, like you said, our hearts go out to his family.
And maybe sometime in the future we'll talk about his role in the MCU. Black Panther is a pretty good movie. Might talk about someday.
Definitely.
Saying that aside, let's talk about Batman. The Batman movie. And I think when you say Batman movie, I think this is the Batman movie. It's so iconic, so classic. It really is what started, at least in public perception. I mean, there had been stories by Alan Moore and Frank Miller before this that this film drew upon, but this was what got in the public's mind the idea that Batman can be this dark, gritty, cool hero. Adaptations play such a big role in the public's perception of comic characters. Like, for instance, take Aquaman. Super Friends messed him up, and then everything that had Aquaman for the next 30 years had to go out of its way to try and make him cool because Super Friends made him lame.
The world saw him on a pink seahorse, and they've hated him ever since.
Yeah, until he got a good film adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Before this film came out, the 1989 Batman movie, the most notable Batman work, at least in the public's mind, was the 1960s Adam West and Burt Ward TV show, which was very cheesy, very goofy, very good, mind you. Cheesy in Silver Age doesn't mean bad, but it did cloud public perception, and before this film came out, a lot of people thought it would be bad because big action-y Batman movie? What? Oh, and it has that comedy actor, Michael Keaton. Oh, it has Jack Nicholson. He's good at being crazy, but... And it's directed by that weirdo Tim Burton. This film won't be good. And was it good? Let's discuss.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched upon that. This had a very interesting production history. You see, the original idea for this film was that it was going to be tonally and like from a story perspective, it was going to be a reboot of the Adam West television show style of the Batman. It was going to be very cheesy, silly, campy. They were going to punch people and there would be a giant pow symbol that came on screen, and that was the direction the studio wanted to take it originally. Allegedly, had they gone in that direction, the studio would have cast Bill Murray as Batman. And for Robin, they would have cast either Matthew Broderick or Eddie Murphy. And it would have been a more silly, cheesy, lighthearted, campy take on Batman. However, it was filmmaker Tim Burton that stepped in and pitched an idea for a more grounded, gritty, serious toned Batman film. The studio decided to go with his idea, and they went ahead with making that film. And as you mentioned earlier, people were very upset. This film was a very controversial production, not so much because of what they were making, but who was behind it, making it. See, at the time, Tim Burton had just gotten off making my favorite of his films, Beetlejuice.
Which also stars Michael Keaton, but in a very not Batman role.
Right, so people were like, what are you talking about? The guy who made Beetlejuice and Pee-wee's Big Adventure, this guy's making a Batman film? Are you kidding me? This is going to be terrible. Then they cast Michael Keaton as Batman, the guy who played Beetlejuice and who up to that point had almost exclusively done comedy. And it's like this, they were like, oh, this is going to be terrible again. Then they cast Jack Nicholson, who, and they admitted, like, yeah, he was good for the role, but an overweight man in his mid-50s playing the Joker, that might be stretching it. So people were pretty much against every detail coming out of this film, from what I've heard. This film came out 10 years before I was born. The film came out, and there are people to this day, 31 years later, still arguing that this is the greatest Batman film we have ever gotten. Live action.
I can understand that. This is a very good film.
It is.
Well,
yes.
It's a good movie. I don't know if it's the best Batman movie,
I
and
don't believe
what
that.
the term best Batman movie even means is complicated, but it is well done.
Right. I agree. I think I like to say that this is not my favorite Batman film.
Oh no, not at all.
I'm a Christopher Nolan fan, die hard.
Oh,
and
same.
not just because that. I love the guy. He's my favorite filmmaker. He's the reason why I want to become a filmmaker. He was my inspiration. I just like to say this is still a very good film. Not just that. I genuinely think that Christopher Nolan's films are the best 3 live-action Batman films we've ever seen. But this film is definitely up there as well.
So let's get into it. Let's recap the story of this film. Basically, it opens up late at night in Gotham City, this crime-filled, rotten den of evil, and we see 2 muggers like rob a family, and then they get attacked by the Bat, this intimidating, possibly supernatural vigilante that just effortlessly takes them out. And, like, after beating these guys up, he, like, holds one over the edge of the building, and the guy asks him who he is, and he says the iconic line, "I'm Batman."
And the rest of the film follows Batman's war against organized crime, led by a man by the name of Jack Napier, whom he first met conducting criminal activities in a chemical factory until he fell over the edge and fell into a vat of chemicals, came out the other end as the sinister Joker. And the rest of the film is the story of Batman's adventures and war against Joker's organized crime gang and his Bruce Wayne's relationship with reporter Vicky Vale.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the movie.
Let's discuss real quick, how accurate do you think this film is to the source material? Big step up in accuracy from the last thing we did. This is, for the most part, aside from a few notable changes which we're going to go into, this is a pretty accurate film.
Yeah, absolutely. It very much so captures the spirit of the tone of Batman and his character. And this film very heavily went on to inspire the Batman animated series, which is seen by many by as the most definitive adaptation, the most definitive version of Batman ever. It's not like a beat for beat continuation of it, but it very heavily went on to inspire it.
No, Batman the Animated Series carries off with a lot of the good things in this, but also it doesn't have some of the changes from the comics, and I would say is a better adaptation to Batman.
Absolutely. Do you want to continue with what we liked first?
Yeah, let's go with what we like, because there's like one major change, there's like two major changes, and those are my big problems with this film. What we liked. I love the set design and appearance of Gotham City in this. This just gothic, imposing city of abandoned factories and pipes and smog and old cathedrals. It is a very Tim Burton film, and that is very good. Gotham City is almost a character unto itself. It's got so much personality just shown through its design, and again, that went to influence so many adaptations of Batman.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I noticed watching it again, rewatching it earlier today, I back up. I used to watch. I watched this film a few times when I was much younger, and I always enjoyed it.
I honestly think I've only seen this film once before, and it was like 5 years ago. Some parts of this film were not how I remembered, and some parts were how I remembered.
But one thing that, upon rewatching it today, one thing that really stood out to me is the production design, like you said, was so incredible. The set design, the gothic architecture, this sensation that this is. You feel that Gotham is a lived-in city. You can feel the dirt and grime and filth just soaking the streets, and it feels like it's suffocating you. The walls of the city are suffocating you. It was very well done. The set design, the production design, the cinematography, it was all very well done.
This is very much a movie that came out in the 80s, and I'm not talking about the Prince soundtrack. In the 80s, there was a crime wave in the United States, and this film is very much heavily influenced by that. Like, Gotham City has always been New York. This is very much a film about the worst elements of New York in the 80s. And you can see a lot of action movies from the 80s that were influenced by the crime wave. Movies like Escape from New York, RoboCop, movies about just these rancid, rotted cities and these strongmen who come in and beat up all the criminals.
This is very much so a Tim Burton film, but in addition to that, I would argue that Tim Burton's kind of restraining himself in terms of his Tim Burtonisms that his films are most likely known for. Because when you watch a Tim Burton film, for the most part, when you watch a Tim Burton film, very few times this is not the case. This is not the case. But most of the time when you're watching a Tim Burton film, you know it's a Tim Burton film. The tone, the production design, the style, all of it is very, very signature to him. His very like dark and twisted style that he has. But for this Batman film, it not quite as much, but he finds the right balance between his own style and making a real world, more grounded Batman story. So it finds a good balance between the two.
This film, visually, it combines Tim Burton darkness, comic book weirdness, and 80s grunginess to create this idea of Gotham City that survives till today. Add in, like, the Zeppelins and sci-fi elements that were added in the animated series, and you've got Gotham City as this sort of timeless, strange city that basically any Batman story could take place in. Another element that really gives it this film, it's definitely a film from the 80s, but it doesn't seem to be set in the 80s. This is heavily influenced by 1930s film noir gangster movies.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it works. This film, probably its best thing is that it defined Batman visually, and it is visually great.
and it brought it to that visualness and style and tone to the mainstream audience, and that's when people realized that Batman can be taken seriously as a compelling character in cinema.
And talking about just aesthetics and defining, mad props to Danny Elfman. Just the
Right.
Batman theme. It is the Batman theme
Yeah.
that this film opens on. It was later used for the animated series and Lego Batman. You can't hear that without thinking Batman. It's such a good
Right.
score. Why wasn't it nominated for an Oscar?
Because the Academy doesn't care about genre films.
I know, but actually, I've read that people complained about Jack Nicholson not getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor from this film, which is ironic considering his two successors who roles in this character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jack Nicholson, a lot of people had mixed feelings about him playing the Joker, from what I understand. But honestly, I think he did a very good job. And yes, backtrack. You're right. I agree. Danny Elfman's score is outstanding. Like, it's timeless. This is Batman's theme. I love the Dark Knight's Hans Zimmer theme. I really enjoy that theme, but Danny Elfman did an outstanding job here.
Honestly, we're gonna be compare. You can't not because we're such big. Because the Dark Knight trilogy is such a big thing when it comes to Batman, and it's so good. The Dark Knight trilogy doesn't have this film's feel, and it has Hans Zimmer instead of Danny Elfman, because those films, a lot of them feel like trying to be a more realistic, grounded deconstruction of Batman. This is
Right.
not that. This movie is Batman pure, except for a
Right.
few elements.
Right, and I am personally going to try and not make a whole lot of comparisons to The Dark Knight, because we're not talking about The Dark Knight, we're just talking about Batman '89. But yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. Speaking of Jack Nicholson's Joker, this was a controversial pick. A lot of people had some mixed feelings about it. Jack Nicholson can do crazy really well, and
Yeah,
he
just
can.
The Shining is what he was best known for, not just
Right.
before this, but after, and other roles like his are all insane.
Right, and playing the most, I don't know about the time, but the most iconic Madman in all of comic books. It was a very interesting pick. I think he did a great job as the Joker.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah,
awesome.
he like you said, he was able to balance, like you said about the entire film. He was able to balance the silliness with like the grunginess that comes with this world. And there were times where he'd play this sadistic murderer, but then the second minute he would be like twirling around and silly and weird, and it worked, and he committed to it.
Yeah, like for instance, there's a fun scene where Joker electrocutes someone with a
It's a great
buzzer.
scene, by the way.
A very powerful joy buzzer that completely turns his skin to ash and murders him. And it's terrifying. And then Jack Nicholson starts talking to the corpse like he's alive, and it's silly.
You want to know? You want to know something? A really interesting fact that I know about that scene. See,
What?
the part where right before he tells all the mobsters to get out of here, he wipes his forehead with his handkerchief, and he kind of wipes away the makeup he's put over his now white skin to make himself look like he's a person, or like a regular person. Well, when he wiped his face away, he revealed the white makeup. That was very complicated for them to figure out how to do. See, what they did was they needed to find a way to put the white makeup on Jack Nicholson. They had to put another layer of skin tone makeup over that. So, but they had to find a way to, when he wiped his forehead off, it would take away the skin tone layer while leaving the white layer of makeup. So they had to do I don't know, different chemicals that the makeup is made out of, to in order to, like, when you wipe it away, wipe the top layer away, it leaves the white layer behind it. So it was a very
Yeah.
complicated process for them to figure out. But here's my question: why couldn't they just put white makeup on the handkerchief?
I don't know.
Like, it seems like such a simple,
Um,
interesting trick. Just put white makeup when he wipes his forehead. He's like leaving white streaks.
I don't know anything about makeup. I can't
Neither do
say.
I, but I just think it's a funny
Yeah.
thought.
Also, slightly related, this film, unlike a lot of Batman versions, actually shows, like, it does have Joker with the white skin bleached by
Right.
acid, comic accurate, but it shows him, like, wearing makeup to look normal a few times. And when he does, he's actually so uncanny
Yeah.
valley. He's scarier without the white skin.
Yeah, yeah. I will say one thing that, again, upon rewatching this film, that I realized they did an amazing job on the makeup effects on the Joker. Like, he, the Joker looks monstrous in this film. He looks like a freak of nature. He looks terrifying, and that permanent grin he has, just all of it, the makeup when combined with the prosthetics, just all of it makes him seem like a monster. And it was so well done. It was really great. In addition to Jack Nicholson's performance, which was all incredible. They definitely took a much different approach to the Joker in this film, and I think it paid off for what this film was going for.
It's been observed by people, including DC management, with recent storylines revealing that there's actually three people who are the Joker, and
Right.
that's a long story for another day. That there are basically three different personas the Joker has been in the comics. There's Cesar Romero-esque, friendly, cartoonish clown. There's Heath Ledger-esque, violent sociopath obsessed with Batman. And then in the middle, there is this. There is silly gangster who's just as brutal as he is insane. And Jack Nicholson perfectly encapsulates that type of Joker.
Right, exactly. Like, if you look at all of the live action adaptations or portrayals of the Joker, there's so many different. Joker as a character is so chaotic that you can take him in so many different directions. Like Cesar Romero, he was the clown. Heath Ledger, he was an anarchist. Jared Leto is
In there for 3 minutes.
crazy, weird, eccentric. He's in there for 3 minutes and he's just this
Yeah.
eccentric weirdo, psychedelic weirdo. And Joaquin Phoenix is just a mentally ill man beaten down by society. But Jack Nicholson's Joker, he's silly, wacky, but he's also the gangster, which is a very interesting part of the Joker that I feel hasn't quite got as much attention in terms of the other adaptations. So, for what they did with the Joker in this film, yes, they added an origin to him because if I'm not mistaken, this was also the inspiration for the Killing Joke, or did that come after?
No,
No,
this was '89, I believe. Killing Joke was when was it? Would have been 88. Yeah, it
so
was
the year
88.
before. Okay, never mind.
And even then, Killing Joke, the like thrown into like chemicals by Batman, how intentional that was by Batman varies. That's been a thing since like Silver Age, but this film did take that. It did carry on with the Killing Joke's revitalization of this. Also, notably, this film gives Joker a name, and it's one of the only versions of Batman to give Joker a name.
Right, and fun fact, that name, Jack Napier, recently in a non-canonical Batman storyline called Batman White Knight. It's a storyline in which the Joker takes medication that makes him sane again, and he becomes his normal self, a mentally ill man by the name of Jack Napier. So that carried on to this day. Yeah, this film has very much so influenced the public so much since it came out.
Yeah, it is the
Right.
Batman movie, for
Mm-hmm.
better or for
Yeah.
worse.
Danny Elfman did a great job. Tim Burton did a great job with the production design, the cinematography, the directing. Jack Nicholson did a great job. Danny Elfman did a great job. One thing that I was very interested by upon rewatching, I have thought about this, and I just now upon rewatching it, I was like, just how true it was. Batman is not the main character of this film.
Oh no, he received second billing, and I mean, sometimes that happens because just Jack Nicholson is a bigger actor than Michael
Right.
Keaton, but no, Batman isn't in this very much. I actually counted, let's see, one, two, three. There are only 4 appearances of Batman, plus like 2 or 3 of him as just Bruce
Right.
Wayne. But like, there's the opening scene, there's him throwing Joker into acid, there's saving Vicky, and then there's the climax. This isn't really a heavy Batman movie, it's mostly
Right.
the Joker.
The film predominantly follows the Joker and Vicky Vale,
Yeah.
which is interesting. It's really the only Batman film, like live action Batman film, that doesn't predominantly follow Batman. It follows the Joker and Batman's love interest, which is very fascinating considering that this film, despite that, is still so compelling and has gone so
Yeah.
far to this day to influence current adaptations of Batman, and people's perceptions of him. It's so fascinating to me that a Batman film that has very little Batman in it, is A, still a very solid movie, and B, still so influential for the Batman character.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Vicky Vale?
I thought she's an interesting choice for a love interest, because, well, to my knowledge, apart from Catwoman and Talia al Ghul, I mean, I could be wrong on this, Batman doesn't have any love interests besides those two.
There are a few minor ones, but yeah, like the most major would be Catwoman, with Talia and Vicky being kind of
Right.
far behind, and a lot of the film adaptations create new love interests for him, like Rachel Dawes.
I thought she was good. My thoughts on her, I don't know, because for pretty much she is one of the main stars of this movie. So, what are your thoughts on her?
Can be honest, I didn't really like Vicky Vale that much. Just like her role as the damsel in distress that everyone's in love with, to a point. It's Batman and the Joker fighting over a
Yeah.
girl, and like I didn't really think there was much personality or depth
Right.
to Vicky, and I especially didn't think that there was much chemistry between her and Batman, despite the film focusing heavily on their
Right.
relationship. I don't know. I didn't like
Yeah,
it too much.
honestly, I really don't have much of an opinion of her because, like you said, I do agree with you. She was kind of just there to
The
be.
damsel in distress.
Yes, the damsel in distress, kind of just there to be like through the viewer's eyes. Like she's really the one that we see most of the film through, and she's the one in this completely extraordinary circumstance, and she can't outshadow the rest of the film. And that just kind of leaves okay. I didn't hate her. I just kind of, she's okay. She served a purpose and didn't really.
I don't hate her because there isn't enough of a character there to have strong feelings about.
Right. She is one of the two main characters. Well, one of three. One of three of the characters that this film predominantly follows, and the other two are literally Batman and the Joker. So, yeah, honestly, she's just. I think her purpose from the beginning was just to be like a relatable viewpoint character for the audience. And looking back on it, it's just kind of leads her to be a bland character. There's not much there for her.
And part of the reason that there isn't much chemistry between her and Bruce is Batman's weird in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about the violent, unhinged murderer thing later, but in his Bruce Wayne persona, they don't have him be the suave playboy. They have him be like this awkward loser recluse, which
Yeah.
I don't actually mind too much, because let's be honest, Batman kind of is a bit of an awkward loser recluse.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is doesn't really lead to much believable romance, especially not romance strong enough that they would fall in love and want to change their lives for each other after one day.
Honestly, I feel like we've segued nicely into our thoughts on the negatives of this film. Vicky Vale is the main character, or as one of the characters. She's not much to her. But one thing, in terms of accuracy, this film very well portrays the tone of Batman. But there are other elements to like Batman's story that are not very accurate to the Batman character and to Batman's story. One of them being the fact that Bruce Wayne is, like you said, he's this rich billionaire playboy who, like, everybody knows. He's like an Elon Musk type character. Like, everybody knows him, and he just has all the money in the world. His parents helped build the city, and in the film, there's a scene where Vicky Vale and that other weirdo guy she's working with,
Knox.
Knox, that's it, yes. Where Knox and Vicky, they're investigating into Bruce Wayne's life, and they found out that as a child, Bruce Wayne's parents were murdered. In the comics, that's pretty much just common knowledge. The man who helped build Gotham City, his death and his wife's death in front of his, 11-year-old son, that is something that people know about. And I get Vicky Vale not knowing it because she's new in town, but, like you said, it just kind of feeds into this idea, like, Batman is supposed to be this, like, a celebrity in Gotham, and now he's just kind of this awkward recluse that not many people know about. He just kind of, he's supposed to be, like, the richest man in all of Gotham, and in this film, he's just kind of a guy with a lot of money. Kind of a weird guy with a lot of money. In terms of that, yes, that is, I feel, one thing that I was disappointed by. It worked a little bit for this film. It did work, but I'm like, again, it's not totally true to Batman's character.
I don't mind Batman not being like a playboy too much, but there is another major change to his character that I don't like. Batman doesn't kill and Batman doesn't use guns. Those are like two big things about Batman that have been in the comics for decades when this film came out. And Batman kills a lot of people in this movie. Like, there's a scene where he blows up a factory full of Joker's goons, and, like, the climax has him flying in with his jet and gunning down dozens of bad guys with Gatling guns and missiles.
I completely forgot about that factory scene before I saw it. I saw that.
It's so brutal.
I was just like, damn, he really blew all those guys up.
And I don't like Batman being a killer, not just because it's inaccurate, but because, A, it prevents you from adapting a lot of really good parts of Batman as a character. Like, for instance, my all-time favorite Batman story, I think it's the best thing with Batman ever, is Under the Red Hood, which is really diving into and questioning why Batman doesn't kill, and it's this great drama. The animated adaptation of it that had Jensen Ackles as the Red Hood is probably the best Batman movie. Maybe not the best movie featuring Batman, but the best Batman movie.
Right.
And the other thing is, I don't like Batman killing because, as we said earlier, Batman's always kinda evil. When Batman kills, it stops being kinda. You run the risk, and this film kinda veers into it, of having Batman be the Punisher, just not a guy who's about saving and being a good guy. Like, to me, the core ideal of Batman, what he's about, is someone who has gone through pain in his past and wants to prevent others from going through the same thing. And when Batman kills, it very easily switches from wanting to protect others to, I don't like criminals, so I'm gonna kill a bunch of people for fun. Which isn't very heroic and isn't what I like about Batman.
Right. I've had a lot of discussion, personally, about why Batman shouldn't kill in the wake of Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Because in that film, Batman kills some people and uses guns, and a lot of people I've met are like, I don't care if Batman kills. I'm like, well, yes, they had to establish that Batman would kill Superman, but side note, I think that film would have been so much more compelling if Batman were struggling with this idea of, like, I don't kill, but I might have to kill people.
And even if it doesn't do that, part of the problem with that film is that Batman just comes off as this asshole in it who wants to murder Superman for no reason.
Right.
And the fact that he kills a bunch of people does not help that.
Right, I know. But yeah, we can talk about Batman vs. Superman another day, but You're right. A lot of people I've met, I've had conversations with in the wake of that, they say, well, the film justifies it, or people will tell me, they say, actually, I don't mind, I don't care if Batman kills because I don't care. But me personally, I'm like, Batman not killing is like the defining character trait of him as a person, not just just everything. He, like you said, he's someone who he's experienced pain in his life, and he doesn't want anyone else to know that pain. His moral code of not taking a life at the expense of someone else's, in order to, not taking a life, that's more than just a simple desire he has. That's his motivation. That's his point of view of life. That's defines who he is as a person. He genuinely, as a person, genuinely cares about human life, even those who are criminals. Sure, he's going to beat the shit out of those people, probably cripple them, and their hospital bills will kill them later on, but
Yeah,
still,
yeah, but
Batman not killing is not only an iconic piece of Batman's story and Batman's character from the comics, but it also just purely defines who he is as a person. And in this film, they just completely ignore that. He blows up a chemical factory filled with living people in it. He, like you said, uses Gatling guns and tanks and all that. And so, yes, that part, again, was like, they tried to get away with it by not addressing the fact that Batman doesn't kill. I have one rule. And they never addressed that, but
I will
that's no
say,
excuse.
at least it isn't the Dark Knight trilogy where they do harp heavily on Batman not killing, but every single Chris Nolan Batman movie ends with him murdering someone.
Yeah, that was, again, one thing I wasn't the biggest fan of.
Like I said, I haven't seen this film in like 5 years before. A few days ago, we record these on Monday, and I watched it Saturday evening. I remembered the opening scene to this film wrong. I thought it was something really good that I liked. Because how I remembered it going is like there's this couple and their son after a movie going from a movie theater going to back alley. Then some criminals try to rob them. Then Batman shows up and saves them. And I'm like, yes, that's a great way to introduce Batman to the film because that's him being Batman. He's protecting others. But yeah, that's not what happens in this. I remembered it wrong. They get mugged while Batman kind of watches from a distance, and then like 10 minutes later he beats up the criminals and he doesn't give the family their money back. Like, and that's a missed opportunity.
Another thing that I was not the biggest fan of, even as a kid, I was like, really? You really did that? Having the Joker be the one who killed Bruce Wayne's parents.
No.
No. Not only, like, it was really shoehorned into the film, like, last minute, to just give it more of a personal story, but, like, it felt forced and fake, and it was honestly kind of dumb.
Batman's parents being killed by just some random mugger, I mean, it makes it so his conquest is against all evil, not this one gangster who killed his parents specifically. And also putting Joker killed Batman's parents with the film ending with Batman chucking Joker off a building, it makes it feel like Batman is really just murdering a dude for revenge, not because of like the evil stuff, tried to poison Gotham, just he chucks a dude off the building because revenge.
Right.
I know.
You know what that kind of reminds me of?
What?
I'm reminded of filmmaker Zack Snyder, who directed Batman vs Superman. He was asked why he decided to make Batman kill people in that film, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, I don't see it as Batman killing people. I see it as like he's doing stuff and people will inadvertently die because of it, you know?" And then and I saw that clip followed by a clip of Batman driving the Batmobile into a truck full of criminals, and then it explodes and kills all of them. It's like, that seems pretty direct, my guy.
Hey, I didn't kill him. The bullet killed him.
Yeah, the
Or
bullet I fired from my gun. that I
Yeah.
was holding and pulled the trigger of.
Yeah.
That killed him, not me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, that was a side note.
We've been through all the major things. There's just a few odd things in this film that I'd like to bring up. Let's see. Billy D. Williams is in this film in a couple scenes as Harvey Dent, which is
Yep.
interesting. It's like they were setting up a future sequel where he would play Two-Face. Except when they eventually made that movie, they replaced him with Tommy Lee Jones, and that's odd.
Well, what happened there is, and we can talk about this in the future, but the studio was unhappy with audience reception to Batman Returns, the sequel to this film. So they demanded that the next film be a more lighthearted, cheesy, campy adaptation of it. So, and that was not the direction Tim Burton wanted to take, so he left. Had Tim Burton stayed on with that film, they would have had Harvey Dent be played by, not by Tommy Lee Jones, by Billy D. Williams. And so the reason why he was in a few scenes and then he was noticeably absent from Batman Returns, had Tim Burton stayed on with the Batman franchise after that, had the studio decided to not go in a different direction, Billy D. Williams would have played Two-Face in the third installment of this franchise.
Yeah, Batman Forever.
Yeah. Although, under Tim Burton, it would not have been called Batman Forever. It would have been called Batman Continues.
Okay, well, Batman Forever is a dumb name.
Right.
Batman Continues is somehow worse.
Yeah, I know.
Other weird things in this movie. Commissioner Gordon sucks in this movie. Commissioner Gordon's one of my favorite Batman characters, and he's just a non-entity in this film. He barely does anything. And
yes, that was something. Yeah, that was something I wanted to bring up as well. That's what I was forgetting. Like I said, it's a very different take on Batman's character and Batman's story. It does very well define Batman, the tone of Batman and Batman. When I think of Batman, I don't think of like a reporter, his relationship with a reporter. I think of his dynamic with the police department, you know?
Yeah.
His relationship with Commissioner Gordon. And like you said, Commissioner Gordon's barely in this movie. He's kind of just an old guy.
Yeah. If you're not gonna have Commissioner Gordon be like a major character, just call the character Loeb.
Right.
And have Commissioner Gordon later. This film gives the Joker a sidekick named Bob, who had an action figure made out of him, and is maybe my favorite character in this film. Just this Joker's really loyal dude, who the Joker just kills at the end. I can't believe it. But Bob, you're my number one guy.
Rest in peace, Bob. We love you.
Rest in peace, Bob. They mention that they have to have this big parade because it'll save Gotham's economy, because it'll show Gotham isn't filled with criminals, and people will come back, and that'll fix Gotham's failing economy. So, oops, that didn't happen, so I guess Gotham's going to continue to be a failing city filled with crime because of poor economic conditions.
This time they have the Batman, so they're kind of okay.
I wouldn't want to move to Gotham City just like, oh, don't worry about the terrorist who tried to poison hundreds of people. He was killed by the guy who we don't know who flies around with a missile, with a fighter jet shooting at people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously.
I'd like to praise the climax for being just wonderful Batman wackiness with the Joker's poisoned balloons, which Batman defeats with his plane, which hadn't appeared before that scene, having giant anti-balloon scissors and flying in front of the moon, making the Batman logo. The Joker shoots down the Batplane with just a big-ass gun.
Yeah, that was weird. His airplane just appears. In the film, he just has it.
It's a pretty shitty plane if it gets shot down by a pistol.
It's a big pistol, man. It's got a long barrel.
It was a big pistol.
One thing that I thought was kind of weird was the climax of the film when he's up in the bell tower of the cathedral. They established that Joker and Vicky are really the only two ones heading up there at the time. And when
Mhm.
Batman gets up there, there's out of nowhere like three or four goons of Joker's men, just three or four Joker's men, just there ready to fight Batman. And maybe he had planned like, hey, you guys go up there and wait for me. I'm gonna take this girl up there with me, but when I get there at the end of this whole thing to get me out of here, but I don't know. I just thought it was weird. Like they established that he's the only person. The three of them are the only person there, and then suddenly there's like three or four random henchmen just there. I thought it was weird.
Also, that's the weirdest cathedral
Right.
ever. It's like 50
Yeah.
stories. Who built
Yeah.
that? One last thing, it was an interesting thing that they didn't really go into much, but I noticed rewatching this film, the Joker's evil schemes kind of have a motif to them. Like, he seems to hate conventional beauty, like, he destroys paintings in an art museum, and his evil plan is poisoning beauty supplies like makeup and
Right.
hairspray, which is an interesting motif of his because,
Right.
Joker, disfigured by Batman, so hates conventional
Right.
beauty.
Yeah, that was something interesting. I don't know why, but I was laughing at the scene when on the news, the news crew, they were or the anchor people, the anchors on the news when they were like, "Oh yeah," they were just reading the news and like, "Oh yeah, all these people are dying because of the Joker," and then one of the anchors dies and then they find out they're like, "Oh, makeup products are killing people." And then like the rest of the film, whenever you see like an anchor, they're on the news anchor, they're not wearing any makeup and they look like shit. And I don't know. I thought it was so
Yeah,
funny.
but only the news
Yeah,
anchors. Like, Vicky Vale stays
yeah,
beautiful for
yeah. I
some
just thought it
reason.
was so funny because that just goes to show how fake the news is. I just started laughing because it's just so funny that like the news people on the news wear so much makeup that but under threat of death it's like they look like shit. It's so fun.
Closing thoughts. I think we both agree on this one. Great, just artistic design, Gotham City. This film captures the feeling of Gotham as a city. It has a great portrayal of the Joker. It's filled with tons of awesome stuff, like the Danny Elfman theme, the over the top climax. Oh, by the way, one last note about the climax. Holy crap, the people of Gotham City are dumb. Like, hi, I'm the terrorist who killed a bunch of people. I'm gonna give out money, just come to this place. Swear I won't murder you, wink wink.
Yep. Well, sometimes gotta risk it all. Sometimes I don't know.
I guess. But yeah, great design of Gotham City, great Joker. Not super fond of Michael Keaton's Batman. Don't like he's killing.
What did you think of the bat suit?
Yeah. I don't like it very much. Something about just the black rubber with a few patches of gold just feels
Yeah.
weird. And of course, this infamously, it's the Batman suit where he couldn't move his neck, so it's kind of cheesy, like,
Right.
like just moving his entire body to turn his head.
It was, I imagine it was decent for what they had available for them at the time, but it really hasn't aged well. It's a rubber suit, a clunky rubber suit with a leather cape that it just feels uncomfortable. It looks uncomfortable. It looks heavy. And added to the fact that the cowl itself looks like it looks uncomfortable to wear, and it looks impossible because whenever Michael Keaton was wearing the bat suit, he was physically unable to get in and out of the Batmobile. So they had to use a crane to get him out
Oh god,
because
that's
it's
so
so
dumb.
awkward to wear. And that honestly, that continued until The Dark Knight. The ability for actors, they're unable to move their heads when playing Batman because the cowl is designed that way. It's it just in this film in particular, it's just like the cowl looks so clunky and heavy, and I was not the biggest fan of the film. My personal favorite Batsuit of all time is the video game Batman Arkham Origins. It's a combination of practical, grounded in practicality, and also like comic accurate Batman suit. In terms of this suit, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I imagine it was decent for the time. That pretty much sums up my thoughts on it. I do like this film. I always have. It's a very influential that its influence on not just on mainstream opinion of Batman as well as just Batman's character in general. Its influence cannot be understated. It's very important to the Batman to Batman. Went on to inspire the Batman the animated series. It continues to inspire comic books to this day, and it's very important. Despite the fact that it has very little Batman in it, and there are certain elements of Batman of the story and the characters that are very heavily changed.
And honestly, not just important to Batman. This was one of the first blockbuster superhero movies, and a few years later, we started seeing a lot of superhero movies get made. And I mean, in the 90s, they were mostly crap, but in the early 2000s, they started getting good. And then in the 2010s, 2008 onward, they were really good. And this film played a role in that.
I think, well, because it's like, this film came out at the right time. Making a superhero film was almost unheard of. Like, you could make films about Superman and Batman, and they would be very popular and mainstream. But because, like, those it works for those characters because they're popular. Like, in 1989, there is no way you could make, like, an Iron Man film and it would be as influential. Like, in 2008, when the first Iron Man film came out, even in 2008, like 20 years later, people had no idea who Iron Man was. But yeah, this film came out at the right time for superhero films in general. It was another, like, I would argue, another, like, 12 years before the people started to really see, like, characters who weren't quite as popular as Batman and Superman could get films. But because it was, like, really the early 2000s where people started realizing, oh, superhero films are actually good outside of the most popular characters of all time. But yeah, it came out at the right time for comic book films, for Batman, and it's very and added to the fact that it is still a solid film despite having a few flaws. This is not the best Batman film ever made, in my opinion, but it's still solid.
Do you have a score for it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yes, I would say this film is like a 7.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. Oh, wait, you give low scores.
Well, I wouldn't say low scores, but I have some flaws with it, and that's just my opinion.
I give it 8.5.
Okay, yeah.
Riley, where can they find you?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Riley James Thorpe, and you can find me on YouTube at Riley Thorpe.
Also, check out The First Mag Train Out of Cleveland and Other Short Stories, available now on Amazon. It's a collection of sci-fi short stories I wrote. The ebook's only a few bucks. Go buy it. We'll be back next week where we'll be discussing just a retrospective of how Marvel Studios has treated Hulk as a character.
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, thank you. And as always, I'm Casey Jarms.
And I'm Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head to it. Especially not to a ladder.